being on stage, looking into the lights because you don't see anybody, and just being like, wow, this is my reminder. This is why I'm doing this, because, oh my God, I love the rush. I love the adrenaline, but the anticipatory anxiety that I had to endure to get there
Miserable.
was crippling to the point of where it could be do as much as cause you to, not actually perform. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. As you know, I'm Rachel Fine, registered dietitian nutritionist and host of Nutrition for Dancers. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful dancer who I have connected with over Instagram. That was really where we first connected. And then, of course, we have swapped places on each other's channels. I'm so excited to finally have her on my channel. This is Kirsten Kemp from The Confident Dancer. She's going to help to give us some actionable tips today about how we can stay confident in the studio despite there being so many messages thrown at us in regard to body image, in regard to what we often talk about, food. But Kirsten, let's get started. I'd love for you to really give us a rundown about not just who you are now, but just really walk us through the journey of how you went from starting as a dancer to now being the confident dancer. Love that brand, love that name.
Yeah.
So please walk us through.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to share, especially because I know that in my own journey as a dancer, I felt like I would watch my peers and I would see that a few of them really stood out as being very confident dancers. And I noticed through my own journey, which I'll get into more, that when I really had some low moments in my personal confidence, that my performance really suffered. And I would look at these other classmates who seemed to be thriving, they seemed to trust themselves or believe in the value that they had to offer. I would see them and just be like, how the heck do you change your mind to feel that way about yourself? How? It felt like the biggest mystery in the whole universe at the time when I was really struggling. And so that really planted the seed for what I'm doing now, which as a high performance mindset coach, I specialize in helping dancers to build authentic confidence and establish emotional and mental well-being amidst the pressures that we face as pre-professional, professional dancers, and even recreational dancers. Absolutely face different mental struggles. So I really specialize in helping dancers overcome things like self-doubt, performance anxiety, low self-esteem, perfectionism, comparison, the laundry list of the things that many of us are very familiar with on an experiential level. So when I was young, I started at a small studio and the ballet bug totally bit me and my twin sister as well. We were totally in love with ballet. And it seemed like the natural thing to do is to be a professional dancer if you really love ballet. So, of course, my passion really carried me through my own journey. But as I was training in higher caliber environments over time, I really started to experience the negative effects on my own mental health of having teachers that were extremely strict, very harsh. It changed the way that I saw myself and my worth as a person. I started to, even though at one point I had incredible training, I was training at the Houston Ballet Academy year round, and I'm very thankful for my experience there. It really made me into the dancer that I am today. And it also helped me to be the teacher that I am, because I do still teach ballet. It's something I love. And no matter how much I do in my work as a coach, it's just something I always want to keep up with. So it made me into what I am today. And gave me so many skills to really help others and to also have a professional career that I had. I ended up dancing with Oklahoma City Ballet for a time after I got my degree in ballet from the University of Utah. It's a little bit out of order, but that's a bit of my background dancing wise. But yeah, I was getting some of the best training in the world, but being in that very fast paced and high pressure environment at HBA, I found that my confidence had never been so low as it was in that moment. I didn't trust myself at all. I didn't trust my body. And despite having all these tools to be an excellent dancer, I just honestly crumbled under the pressure at one point. I started out thriving, and then I just really didn't respond very well at all to some of the teaching methods that were used. Some people are okay with it. It just really didn't click with me with one instructor in particular. And so I had a very hard time, and emotionally and mentally, I was just honestly at an all-time low. And so it was during that time in my life where I started to wonder about the connection between the mind and our ability to perform at an optimal level. And so fast forward, I ended up regaining a lot of the confidence that I'd lost when I went into a different environment that felt a little bit more relaxed and supportive while still pushing me towards excellence. Um, and I felt like, especially at the University of Utah, I had that space to kind of build my confidence again. I felt that I had more belief in me from the instructors than I was receiving elsewhere. And so that kind of external validation helps to build up my own confidence again. But even so, towards the end of my college career, I started to become curious about the relationship between external factors and my internal state. I started to ask questions of, do I need external validation or things to be going my way in terms of parts and all that stuff, contracts? Do I need all that to feel confident or to be able to believe in my own skill set? Or is this something that you can develop from the inside? I started to just be curious about it. And mixing that with my experience at Houston Ballet and the realizations I had there, I started to wonder, okay, I know about therapy as a way to gain support for my own mental health. And I knew a little bit about sports psychology and performance psychology, very little at the time. So I knew that there were people out there who were helping all sorts of people to overcome their insecurities and things like that. And so I was curious about those methods for support or resources, but I had this hesitation of, well, do these people really understand my goals and my context and the culture I'm in as a dancer? And so I was kind of hesitant to really seek out support because I just was a little bit confused, like, would I feel supported and understood? And I did end up seeing a therapist, and that was for the most part helpful, but I did kind of feel like, who in the dance world is talking about this stuff and giving specific advice that's not just cliche, like the generalities we hear on social media, like, don't care about what people think. I really value critical thinking, and I tend to be very curious, and I try to be intellectually honest and thorough in my review of different concepts. And so when I would hear something like advice like, oh, just don't care what people think, I thought, I can see some truth to that, but that's really not totally true. It's not totally helpful. And so I was interested in as well in not only who is out here talking about things like how to actually build confidence as a dancer, how to actually overcome things like performance anxiety, which can be so crippling. I know it was for me. It totally drained the joy of dance for me out of the performing aspect. I loved rehearsing, but as soon as there would be pressure around what I was doing, oh, I hated it. I just wanted to disappear. I was like, oh, why do I even dance if this is so miserable? And yeah, I was also wondering who's out there bringing nuance to these discussions around things, like I said, how to build confidence. And nuance in terms of not just throwing out cliches like don't care what people think or believe in yourself, but how, and how do you apply that to your specific context? What are the confines of certain statements, like these generalities we often hear? I just wanted to hear some honest discussions about this. So basically, after a knee injury caused me to make the choice to step away from the professional realm so I could heal, I decided to become that person. I got multiple different coaching certifications and started to just also study for myself different aspects of psychology and performance psychology. And then also just, I'm so fascinated by what it is that I do and that I speak about. I'm genuinely passionate about it. So I just can't help but also listen to podcasts from top performers and examine what are the principles and the through lines and the patterns that are so often replicated by these people who are thriving mentally, they're emotionally healthy, and they perform consistently well according to whatever their definition of their goals. So yeah, I just combined all that to eventually coach dancers individually on the topics that I just talked about, so that they can have authentic confidence. and mental and emotional well-being while being able to perform their best. I was talking all week in Miami and I'm still out of words. I'm still like, oof.
Yeah.
I'm going to
No,
plug
I
in
get
my
it.
computer real quick.
Everything you're explaining is so relatable in the sense of, I remember having crippling performance anxiety, loving when I was actually on stage.
Yeah.
And always, I remember like very specific instances of being on stage, looking into the lights because you don't see anybody, and just being like, wow, this is my reminder. This is why I'm doing this, because, oh my God, I love the rush, I love the adrenaline, but the anticipatory anxiety that I had to endure to get
Miserable.
there was crippling to the point of where it could be do as much as cause you to, not actually perform.
Yeah.
Right. So everything you're doing is incredibly helpful in the dance world. And I wish I had you when I was a dancer, when I was performing. Yeah, that's amazing. And another thing that came to mind as you were talking was this idea that we have so much information, so much the surplus of information out there, most of it being generic. I can only do so much in an Instagram post. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to an extent, a lot of information that you're going to get online is going to be generic. But what happened to me in regard to nutrition, when that information is put on the individual dancer who perhaps now has an entire complex of, for me being a perfectionist, that's when that information goes from being what would have been helpful for somebody to extremely damaging for someone like me. And all the dancers who are watching this know that I am very open about how I am a recovering perfectionist. And the whole way I got into this world, into my profession as a dietitian, was because of my own battles with orthorexia and clean eating mindsets, all of which were born from advice that our body is our instrument, we need to fuel it properly.
Yeah.
Harmless advice. But when that generic advice was given to someone like me, with type A perfectionist 16-year-old who didn't really know much else, have no other perspective on what that means, that advice just went from being harmless to extremely harmful.
Absolutely.
So I loved that you said that. And that's what I want to hear a little bit more of in your own words in regards to how are you able to tailor your information? What are some maybe examples, or in the work that you do with dancers, tailoring information to help them stay confident in this? I don't even want to go as far to on stage. I want to kind of talk more about being in the studio, because I know that a lot of the dancers I work with, even if they're not performing, it can be super hard to stay confident when it comes to looking in a mirror, when it comes to comparison. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that, about, tailoring it for a specific dancer.
Yeah, I think it all starts with awareness and defining terms, which I heard you doing very well in our conversation for my channel. I love how you take the time to define what you're talking about, because what's lost in these generalizations is oftentimes clarity and transparency around what is the definition of confidence that we're working with here. Is it total undying self-belief, an unwavering feeling that you can do anything you want? Is it the status of being the best dancer in the room? The first thing that I do when I'm speaking to a dancer individually, and I also mention this when I'm speaking to groups, is let's define terms. First, become aware of how have you been defining something like confidence. If you say, I want to be confident, what does that actually mean to you personally? And what do you want to gain by getting this feeling or this thing that we call confidence? So I like to define it very simply, which is it is just a feeling of being sure about something. And when we can define it that way, and also become aware of how we've been conceptualizing it ourselves, we can see not only a clearer path to how do we actually build this confidence that we've now clearly defined, but also how have we been defining confidence in the past in a way that isn't working for us. And when you see how you've previously defined it, you'll also be able to more clearly see what has been stopping you from fulfilling that definition. So for example, before I share that simple definition of confidence with dancers, what I often hear is confidence is belief in yourself. Okay, sure. That's an example of it. But what does that even mean? Belief that you can do everything? Belief that you're a good dancer? What does a good dancer mean? And a great way to actually know how you've been defining it is to examine what is the picture in your head that pops up when you say, I want to be a confident dancer. Is it a picture of you doing your best performance all the time, being the best dancer in the room? That's one I hear a lot. Is it getting praise from teachers? Notice the picture that comes to mind. And is that a definition that's working for you? Is my question. Once you know yourself and the definition you've been working from, that's always the foundation for change that we can work with. If we're just throwing around terms and we don't know what it means, we're not going to know where we're coming from or how to get to where we want to go. So I always start there.
It relates so well to honestly what I do at To The Point Nutrition and what I do with my program and my framework, The Healthy Dancer. And we were talking about this prior to coming on air, just how much we love Kirsten's work with the Confident Dancer and with the Healthy Dancer, and how this really comes together for dancers in regards to building sustainable behaviors around food, around body, around being in the studio, and being able to utilize the mirror for progress and not just comparison. But specifically, what I really love here is this idea of defining what we're looking for, and then using something that I utilize with all the dancers I work with, visualization. I love that technique. I love how
That's
you
powerful.
how you so beautifully describe this. And honestly, I wouldn't have even thought to have connected it to something like confidence in the studio, but it really means so much in regards to visualizing what that means for you.
Yeah.
And now for what the dancers that I work with in the framework of nutrition, it's around the word health. It's around the word healthy. Are we only striving for this definition of health that has been put out there by diet culture? And how is that really working for us?
Yeah.
Can we identify how is that really working? Is it really working? Is it causing us to partake in sustainable behaviors or unsustainable behaviors? And the idea of defining, as I was mentioning on your channel in the episode, of defining when we're talking about what works or what doesn't work. For nutrition, in the realm of nutrition, what we often see with these words is it being in the framework of weight loss. And dancers, from my opinion, from my work as a clinician, as a clinical dietitian, this is what obviously we need to shift away from. We need to start prioritizing performance nutrition, not nutrition or food for quote unquote weight loss. And I think you're saying such a similar thing in regards to how can we visualize what it means for us to be confident, to be successful. What immediately came to my mind, by the way, was like a simple pirouette. It could be, I just know for myself in the studio, and I still dance as well, but for myself in the studio, I very much struggle with, in the moment, staying confident in something as minor as a pirouette, but utilizing the techniques you're talking about in regards to defining what does a successful pirouette look like for me? Is it just about the numbers? Is it just about, and really like picking that apart a bit.
Yeah. It's amazing how just defining terms can help with having productive conversations with others. Like when people are having debates, for example, or they're arguing about something, I use this concept of defining terms to look and see so much of the conflict that's happening is because people aren't being clear about what they're actually saying and talking about. And then also with ourselves, with our own inner conflict, if you aren't sure how to get to this place of confidence, how clear are you on what that would look like in your current working definition, which I already said, but I want to just emphasize how, at least going back to what I referenced in my own journey, I used to feel that mental change was the most mysterious and complicated thing in the universe. How do I feel confident like that girl? Well, and then I started to assume, well, if I dance like her, of course I would feel that way. However, here's something I learned by observing higher level dancers, and the caliber of dancers I got to be around, of course, kept getting higher as I got older. What I noticed is my old assumptions that I had from being a teenager did not stand true in reality. My assumptions being one of them is if I danced like her and at that level, I would feel confident. And I think a lot of us logically know that this grass is greener mentality doesn't eventually work, but we still act as if it will pay off for us. So I was thinking, okay, well, if I don't have this flaw anymore, or I finally get that professional contract, then of course I'll feel like that too. But what I saw is you might watch a dancer who has a presence that seems confident, and they dance in a way that technically you desire to dance just like that. And so your assumption might be that they are feeling very confident on the inside, and that their self-assessment is favorable, that they like what they see in the mirror. But what I noticed that really started to blow my mind in the professional world is how many peers I would watch and I would have very favorable thoughts about their dancing. My assessment was, wow, technically beautiful, artistically stunning, must be great to be you. Especially I started to feel that way when I was injured and I couldn't walk. I started to have the realization of how amazing it is what we do. And so my assessment got even more favorable. It's like, this is just amazing. And I would be so grateful to dance like you. And that mindset I had at the time made the realization of other people's internal state even more shocking. I saw, there's one moment that changed my life. And I say this a lot when I give talks. There's this dancer who was the smallest dancer in the company, and she was doing a Grand Allegro. And I was observing class because I just had knee surgery. And she was traveling like no one else. She took up the space. She was stunning and just technically beautiful, artistically, it was all there. And I was just amazed by what she was doing. And then the second she did her last soda shot and she came back to the ground and took 2 steps towards the piano where I was sitting, I saw her face immediately fall and she said, well, that sucked. So it's just really not true that confidence is directly correlated with how well you dance. It is something, going back to my college experience, that you do need to develop from the inside. And that starts with, here's a practical piece of advice, is I like to encourage dancers to say, you can choose what you want to be sure about. We cannot be sure that your performance will be perfect. So if that's what you're thinking confidence is, like confidence is 100% certainty that I'm going to do a good job. Now I identify as a pretty confident person. I wouldn't be confident if that's the measure I was holding myself to. Mm-hmm. So I actually, when I started to be thoughtful of what I choose to place my assuredness in, I started to realize, well, I cannot technically be totally sure that I will give a performance in which there are 0 mistakes. So instead of saying that's a bad thing and I shouldn't make any mistakes, why not experiment with just accepting that mistakes might be there? And already that acceptance, at first it felt like something I wasn't allowed to have, because there's this misconception that if you are okay with mistakes being there, and what I mean by that is you don't actively tell yourself, oh, that was so bad, or I'm a bad dancer. You're like, okay, I made a mistake. There's this misconception that then you will make more mistakes if you're not actively mad at yourself for making mistakes. Mm-hmm. If you don't actively think they're like the worst thing ever. Actually, what I noticed in my own personal confidence is when I allowed the mistakes to be there. And then I said with myself, just as an experiment, and I started to experiment with these things before I learned about psychology and got coaching certifications. And so it's really cool that practically these things check out if you experiment with them. So I thought, okay, well, why not experiment with at least being sure that if I make a mistake, I can keep going and really make the most out of the rest of the performance. At first, that was even a stretch for me because I had a ton of performance anxiety, and my mind had all this evidence from my past of times where I made a mistake, I totally freaked out, and then it got worse. So I thought, well, what if I could rewrite that evidence with myself? So what I did is I started to, instead of every rehearsal, instead of trying to rehearse perfectly, I switched my goal, where I was obviously trying to do my best, and I defined clearly what that meant too. That's a big tip. But what I started to do is I made the point of rehearsal the point for me was, I'm going to get good at recovering from mistakes. So I switched the purpose, I switched the goal. And when I started to build evidence with myself that I could get pretty good at doing that, it's amazing how so much of that anxiety melted away because I was no longer trying to be sure of something that I couldn't be sure about, that I would deliver a flawless performance, but I could be sure that it was totally within my control how I respond to that mistake. And I got better and better at responding to the mistakes the way I wanted to. And so I call that safety net confidence. Like, you can be sure that you could get up again.
Yeah.
And it totally changed how much confidence I felt I was allowed to have.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful, so actionable. And most importantly, it is giving dancers very practical advice in regards to their own practicality in the studio. And that's what's so important here is dancers having practical tools that will take them for the long run. You know what I mean? Having these lofty goals in regards to, we see this a lot again in the nutrition world, lofty goals in regards to uh, how we're eating, right? Having this quote unquote perfect clean diet, lofty goals that are at the end of the day impractical, not realistic. For example, the best way I can explain this is it not allowing for dancers to now have experiences with food that they didn't have control of, that they perhaps eating at a restaurant, eating with friends, eating at a summer barbecue, whatever it might be. As soon as we start to now redefine and, like you said, have acceptance for these other experiences, in your example being the experiences of making these mistakes, and we see with dancers partaking in cleaning behaviors, right? Same thing. As soon as we start to build acceptance towards what you're defining as, you know, making these mistakes, not mistakes around food, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We, like you said, start to build confidence with ourselves in a different perspective. So that was really incredible. And one thing that I want to stress before we wrap it up is just the importance of this being a journey, and this work, especially with mindset. We have this same thing with food and our relationship with food. It's not necessarily something that you are learning how to do. You're checking it off your to-do list, and then you're going off in the world with all of this newfound confidence. I would imagine, similar to the work that I do with dancers, this is a journey and a process, and something that constantly gets worked on, especially because there are so many external factors and external messages coming our way that it can be super easy for us to fall into those I don't want to say negative, but fall into, I like to call them unhelpful behaviors, or as you had mentioned, you had another word for it earlier, I believe.
Like unresourceful, unhelpful.
Yeah. So I really, just to really wrap things up, would love to hear from you a little bit more about what dancers can do in regards to when these instances kind of continue to happen, maybe in the essence of it being part of the environment. I'm sure you get this question, because I get this question a lot. What happens when the environment is really not helpful for a dancer? What are some of the things that you like to tell them?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my time when I was really struggling mentally. And what I recognize that I could have done is, first, if I had just known about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, that really would have changed my life. And you can learn more about this by reading Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist, and she also has a great TED Talk where I first was introduced to this concept of a growth mindset. And basically what it means is the growth mindset is the foundational belief that your potential is unknowable. It is, to an extent, I guess we could say, limitless functionally. You can really always try new things. You can always learn. You can always grow. And so it's really unhelpful in this growth mindset and this assumption or foundational belief to say you are either good at something or you're not. You are either confident as a person or you are not a confident person. That's really the fixed mindset, which is the foundational belief that your potential is pretty much set when you begin an activity or at birth. There are different versions of the fixed mindset, but it is really this belief that you are a good turner or you're not. You are a jumper, you're not, you're flexible, or you're not. And I see this fixed mindset all over the dance community. Even though we are working towards growth, we value growth, we're striving towards it, but we're often working against ourselves. And I'm noticing this a lot in the way that teachers teach as well. This fixed mindset is really propagated. So if I had just known at the time, which dancers can know now that you're listening, you can start to hear in your own thoughts, notice it in your own thoughts, and then also in your environment, if you or your teachers are behaving out of this mindset that you're there or you're not, you're going to make it or you won't. That is incredibly defeating. And that's the mindset I was working with when I thought these dancers are confident. How do they get there? Oh, they just must be that way. And I'm not. In that fixed mindset, one of the symptoms is that you feel that you are the problem and something is wrong with you. It really changed my life to start to recognize that I could listen for these patterns in how a teacher is teaching and recognize now, oh, they believe in the fixed mindset. They believe that a student is worth their time or not, that this one has potential, so she's going to go somewhere, so I'm going to give her attention. And when I just started to become aware of what instructors were propagating this mindset and which weren't, I started to be able to choose consciously how much I'm going to take in from them. Am I going to take on your assessment of what's possible for me? Or am I going to start to use this as an opportunity to think for myself, to have my own self-assessment of, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to take out, I know this is easier said than done, but I've done it, it is possible. And it's something that really built up, I think, my resilience as a person to be able to say, okay, I'm going to hear what you're saying. I'm going to be the gatekeeper of my own mind to say, what I'm here for is to have you share with me things about how to be a better dancer. I'm not here for you to tell me what my potential is. I'm not here for you to tell me what's possible for me or not, what I'm worth as a person. If you like me or not, that dictates my self-perception. Nope. I'm here for advice on how to dance better. And when I decided that within myself, I'm like, okay, that makes it easier to take little things from what you say and reject other things from what you say. And it started to become this wonderful opportunity for me to develop my own mind about things. That developed my confidence personally so much. And it actually came from the pain I experienced of realizing how, back to our conversation on my channel, how unsustainable it was for me to just take in everything an instructor said. I did that and it almost ruined me. I can't do it. I was so emotionally bankrupt as a person that I started to realize, okay, I'm going to listen for that, and be very choosy about how I internalize what you say, and adopting that growth mindset for myself of, if there's something that I want to gain skill in as a dancer, or if there's a mindset that I want to adopt, the foundational belief that I can do something to get closer to that. There's always a way. There's always something to do, to try, to learn. Even it transformed the way I see failure. I really believe in the quote, there's no failure, there's only feedback. And so I can use everything that happened to learn from it, and I use it as fuel to gain something. And in that mindset, you can only win. Even if life is hard, it doesn't always feel good, not always fun, not always easy, but you really can always gain something. So I know there's a lot in what I just said, but that's really how I would approach a very difficult environment.
Yeah, and I'm just going to hook something onto the tail end of this in regard to food. We say this a lot with the idea that not every experience around food is going to be this dandy, positive experience. There are going to be instances where you're going to eat a certain food and you're not going to feel very good afterwards. You're not going to really enjoy the experience you had. Maybe it was a food, maybe you didn't like it, maybe whatever it might be. Sometimes with the work of healing our relationship with food, it gets very into this tunnel of like, we're striving for just positive experience with the food. And I always try to remind dancers that that's actually not the goal. Yeah. The goal is to have all of these experiences, just as you said, even if it doesn't feel so good, even if it does, what can we learn? Can we take that as feedback for moving forward? This is something that we do also when just reintroducing trigger foods that dancers perhaps don't feel that they can trust themselves around. So thank you so much for sharing this incredible insight with us today. I want you to finish up and tell dancers where they can find you so that they can access your incredible resources.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate that. And you've been so generous to have me on the channel and to, just be so encouraging. I'm so glad that we have so much overlap in what we do.
Yeah.
I think success leaves or what's that term? It's like evidence. I forgot the actual thing. But anyway, the whole point is there are commonalities behind what works, no matter the discipline. and it's often in the mindset behind it. So no surprise that we share some similar ideas. Anyway, so dancers can find me at theconfidentdancer.com. It's also kirstenkemp.com, but thanks parents for giving me kind of a difficult name. So if you type in kirstenkemp.com, you won't find me. Kirstenkemp.com or also theconfidentdancer.com. It leads to the same place. That's where you can learn more about my coaching services, work with me one-on-one. And I also, you might see me at your summer intensive. I do speak to groups, or, also I've had dancers go to my website and just share my page with their teachers. Like, hey, she does these speaking workshops and she talks about how to build confidence. Will you have her at my summer intensive? And, so that's a way to encourage your teachers or directors to, have me come and share with your whole group about more in detail about how to build confidence, how to overcome self-doubt, things like that. And of course, I'm on social media, YouTube, The Confident Dancer, Instagram, Kirsten _, The Confident Dancer. Someone already took that and has no posts, by the way, but you can find me there. I know I share lots of free advice on those two places, and I'm just happy to be able to help.
Yes, it was a pleasure connecting. For everyone watching, look out. Kirsten and I chat on her channel. Now you have access on my channel.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you everyone for watching.